good.
Following up. Roger, roll with planet. Flight outside of speed off.
Yikes. You bet. Concur. We don't need any more of these.
All right, and welcome everyone to the NASA spaceflight launch coverage for the launch of CRS-22 and the Dragon capsule up to the International Space Station with a host of scientific supplies, spacewalking equipment, and crew cargo, as well as 2 new solar array sets for the International Space Station. I'm Chris Gebhardt. I'm the Assistant Managing Editor of NASA Spaceflight, and joining me today out in the field at the Kennedy Space Center press site is Thomas. Thomas, how's it going today?
It's going great. Hey, everybody. Welcome. You're looking live at Launch Complex 39A at the Kennedy Space Center. A Falcon 9 rocket and a Cargo Dragon spacecraft are, like Chris said, ready to make their journey to the International Space Station about 40 minutes from now, and it's a beautiful day to go to space.
Indeed it is. And also joining us on the stream for commentary and to help answer your questions is the one and only Julia Bergeron. Julia, how's it going this morning?
Hi, hello there, Chris. It is going wonderfully. I am joining you from, I would like to say sunny Orlando, but it's very cloudy Orlando. And I'm watching the views that Thomas is bringing us today.
Yes, indeed. And also helping behind the scenes is Michael Baylor, producing and directing. So, Michael, thank you for all of the work that you do behind the scenes as well. And Julia, we hope that you also get a break in the clouds so you can hopefully see this if we do lift off this afternoon.
Crossing my fingers.
Indeed. Before we talk about some of the science experiments and satellites that are on board this particular mission, Thomas, I think there's one question that that's on everyone's mind right now, and that is the weather. I know officially there's about a 40% chance of weather violations or a 60% chance of acceptable conditions, but what are you hearing down there, and what does the weather currently look like from your vantage point?
Sure. So going into today, the primary concerns for the launch execution forecast from Space Launch Delta 45 suggested some cumulus clouds and a chance of precipitation could cause some problems for today's launch attempt, as well as the backup opportunity tomorrow should that be necessary. Right now, there are some clouds in the area, but there's also a nice big patch of blue sky above the pad. And right now, I don't see anything that would strike me as a launch weather criteria violation. A little bit wind on the ground, but nothing that we would be concerned about for a launch criteria problem. And as of the latest we heard, SpaceX was conducting their go, no-go poll for propellant load. So if they poll go at that point, that would be a good sign that the weather criteria are in fact green at this point. Right now from here, it looks like a beautiful weather for a launch.
Excellent. Yeah, and currently showing on radar, the current closest rain shower is about 17 kilometers away. So hopefully that break in the clouds holds there over the Space Center as we head down into propellant loading operations that should be picking up here in just a couple of minutes at the L-35 minute mark. That upper clock in the upper left-hand corner next to the CRS-2 designation is the time until liftoff. There are no holds in a Falcon 9 countdown. So that is both the T- time and the L- time, the time on the clock and the time until liftoff today. So with that, as always, on a NASA Spaceflight stream, if you have any questions, feel free to tag us in chat at NASA Spaceflight. That Michael has a program that he wrote that helps us see the questions as they come in. And of course, channel memberships, channel subscriptions, super chats, always appreciated. And to start us out, Sebastian with a $5 super chat is saying, safe trip to the Squidstronauts. There are squids on board, Thomas. You want to tell us a little bit about that?
There are some squidstronauts, and I'm gonna have to steal that. You know, I just wrote astronauts in the launch article, but I like squidstronauts better. There are a couple of baby squids on board that have some cool bioluminescence properties, and researchers want to see how the microbes that cause that interact with microgravity. So they're sending up a whole bunch of little itty bitty squids on Dragon today for some microgravity research once they get to the station. There's also some tardigrades, so a couple different varieties of living things on board Dragon on the way to the space station, even though it's a cargo Dragon. No humans on board, but some astronauts nonetheless.
And Thomas Enfang with $5 noting those tardigrades, saying the tardigrades on board are actually trying to escape Earth and return to their home planet so they can figure hopefully not. But yeah, and I'm going to steal the quote from one of our photographers, Stephen Marr, from earlier today, who said, you know, the squidstronauts and the tardigrades might turn their nose up if we called it an uncrewed mission, so maybe a non-human mission.
Yeah, we'll have to skirt around that somehow.
Exactly. And at this point, everything is go for propellant load, and the teams are receiving their standard what to do if they need to abort. The countdown arises at this point. So with 35 minutes and 48 seconds remaining, we are about to enter propellant loading for the Falcon 9 here ahead of its launch on the CRS-22 mission up to the International Space Station. And Emma is saying in our chat, CRS-22 launching on my 22nd birthday. Well, happy birthday, Emma.
Happy birthday,
yeah,
perfect.
Launches on your birthday are always great, right? You can't ask for a better candle than that. Nicotine Jenkins
A
with
golden
Oh,
launch.
yes. Say that again, Julia, sorry?
Well, that would make it a golden launch birthday, a 22nd during the 22nd CRS.
There you go. Yeah, like that. I like that. And yes, so here we go, crossing the 35-minute mark now. So into propellant loading operation. So right now, RP1 kerosene and densified liquid oxygen will be flowing into stage 1, and RP1 kerosene will be flowing into stage 2. That fuel load will last until about 2 minutes, 30 seconds prior to liftoff, before closeouts begin and the Falcon 9 is prepared for liftoff. But before we get there, again, if you have any questions, keep them coming in chat. Tag us at NASASpaceflight, and we will get them out there. Here's a good question from a Rough Rider show, which came with a super chat. Will they ever name the cargo dragons?
I can take that one. I'm going to guess no. Right now, this dragon is simply known by its serial number, which is C209, the 2 signifying it's a version 2 version of Dragon, and 9 being just the 9th in line. And they've only really given the names to the crew variants, and those are usually named by the first crew that flies on them. So, Cargo Dragon, I mean, unless you're going to ask the Squidstronauts what to name the capsule, I don't think you've got a source for a name for this one, so they'll just stick with the serial number, just like we refer to the Falcon 9 boosters by their serial numbers, this one being B1067. They won't get a proper name beyond that. That's reserved for the crew vehicles.
Alrighty. And I think you just kind of touched on this a little bit, Thomas, but Alex is asking, new booster, question mark?
I know, it has been a while. In fact, the last time we had a new booster was all the way back in November for the Sentinel-6 mission from Vandenberg Space Force Base now. Since then, this is the first time we've had a brand new booster making its debut flight, Booster 1067. And actually, this booster has already got a pretty strong manifest lined up. After today, assuming a successful recovery, we're expecting this mission to fly 2 human spaceflight missions. First, the Inspiration 4 mission, an all-civilian, privately funded mission in support of St. Jude's Research Hospital, and then the NASA Crew 3 mission carrying 4 astronauts to the International Space Station. Beyond that, the booster will likely go into sort of the normal rotation with Starlink missions, other satellite missions, things like that. But a very strong opening manifest for Booster 67. And interestingly, this will be only the second time that this booster lights its 9 engines on the bottom because it did not conduct a static fire.
Yeah, and why wasn't that, Thomas? Yeah, no static fire. I mean, that's weird for SpaceX.
It is weird. Well, it's weird. I mean, in the broad scheme of things, it's not so weird because SpaceX has been skipping static fires for quite a while now. However, this particular one is noteworthy because it's a brand new booster. So the only testing they've done is the full duration firing they do at McGregor, Texas, right after the booster is produced. And then they ship it off to wherever the launch site is, in this case, Kennedy Space Center. This booster has conducted that test, but nothing beyond that. Normally, with a booster with only 1 test firing's worth of data, they would conduct a static fire here as well for just a couple seconds out of the launch pad to make sure it really is all ready to go. For some of the boosters that have flown several times before and they have all of that data to work with, they can skip the static fire. But for this mission, it's a little noteworthy. But basically, the NASA and SpaceX teams looked at the data from that one test, looked at all the data from all the other Falcon 9 launches, which are, of course, also relevant, and determined that they were very confident that this booster was ready to go and that the extra test simply wasn't necessary. And that's just a little less work to do leading up to the launch, so they went ahead and said, you're good to go. This is the first time a NASA mission will not have a pre-launch static fire like that. So SpaceX continuing to streamline their operations a little bit more every year with higher launch cadence and faster pad turnarounds, and skipping static fires might be just another step in that process.
And speaking of quicker turnarounds, because you mentioned that this booster is both earmarked for Inspiration 4 as well as Crew 3, but they're only like 3 weeks apart from one another. How's that going to work? That's a quick turnaround for a crew booster.
It is, however, that is kind of at the limit at what we expect a booster turnaround to end up being. Also, I apologize if you're hearing a helicopter in the background. The NASA security helicopter is doing a flyby. But
we could barely hear it, actually.
Barely hear it. Well, that's what that was. Yeah, that is kind of at the limit at what a booster turnaround is, but it's not unreasonable. It's kind of reasonably expected that they can conduct that turnaround. And Inspiration 4 is set for the middle of September.
Sorry, Thomas. I just want to point out quickly that is the Starship, or what was going to be the Starship on the far left of this camera. You don't often see that on public cameras that are released to the public, at least. So I thought I would point that out quickly.
Yes, that's very true.
For a second, I thought you were seeing it from my camera. I'm like, wait, how? But now I see what you're saying. Yes, absolutely.
Indeed. So I like this. Alex K in our super chat saying that's one small step for a tardigrade and one large step for tard kind. I'll take it. I'll take it. And I just have to mention this on air because it's a Star Trek Discovery reference, and I love these. NASASpaceflight. Does Chris really think that mixing spaceflight and tardigrades is such a good idea? Look at what happened to the USS Glenn. Yes, Star Trek Discovery can teach us how to treat our tardigrades nicely in space. Yes. Here's a good question for visibility. Will I be able to see this launch from out on the water off Palm Beach in South Florida? A lot of viewing for this one today is going to come down to the cloud cover. There's immense cloud cover in and around the Kennedy Space Center area as storms sort of fueled by tropical moisture are popping up around the Space Center, although right now it looks okay for liftoff weather here today. But it's really going to come down to cloud cover in your area as to whether or not you're going to be able to see this today. Yeah. Here's a good question for Thomas or Julia. Zach wants to know, does Cargo Dragon have the same crew hatch as Crew Dragon does? And do they use it to load cargo into the capsule, or do they do it through the docking port?
I'll let Julia answer.
Thomas.
Never mind. I guess I'll take it. I believe it is the exact same crew hatch as on Crew Dragon. And in fact, you may have noticed in some of the pre-launch photos, the crew access arm was extended and right up against the Dragon capsule. And they actually use that to late load cargo that's, especially temperature sensitive or time sensitive that needs to be loaded at the last possible minute. They actually use the crew access arm for that purpose. And to that end, most of these CRS-2 contract missions, so anything beyond CRS-21, will likely use 39A for that purpose. They can load cargo late at Pad 40, but they can't use the crew access arm, so they have to do it prior to raising the vehicle vertical. So it's a little easier to do it here at 39A, so unless there's some schedule conflict that they can't get around, these cargo missions are going to be planned to launch from 39A for that purpose. But yeah, they load it right through the same crew hatch because the docking port is covered by the nose cone, which isn't supposed to be open here on the ground, won't be open until it reaches orbit.
Gotcha. And before we get to one of the other payloads that is on board, I've got some questions about the flight profile here. So Max is asking, how long will the coasting phase be up to the International Space Station? So a great question. Yeah, good question. So actually, whether they launch today, Thursday in 27 minutes, or if they have to delay until tomorrow, the phasing for both days actually results in a docking on Saturday morning at 9 o'clock UTC, 5 a.m. EDT. So today or tomorrow, actually, they get to the station at the same time. After that is when it starts to change a little bit, and they'll have days when they can't launch because of phasing constraints, days that are more favorable, and so on and so forth. But nice little coincidence where the phasing either today or tomorrow results in them getting there at the same time. Now, here's another good question. And again, before we get to the payload, the other payload on board, there are two questions that are sort of connected. Shravan and Everyday Space Nerd are asking, does Cargo Dragon have Super Draco motors? And if there is a RUD, could the Cargo Dragon abort like Crew Dragon does?
So the answer there is no. Mostly. There's no Super Draco motors on board, so you can't abort in the sense that the Crew Dragon would, where it would literally fly away from a failing booster. However, as SpaceX unfortunately learned on a previous CRS mission all the way back at CRS-7, during a launch failure, the Dragon capsule is pretty resilient and actually would usually survive an exploding Falcon 9 right below it. So even though there's no abort motors to get it more safely away, as long as the capsule remains intact, it will actually deploy its parachutes when it reaches the right altitude on the way back down and attempt to let splash down safely so they can recover the capsule and everything on board, and take some silver lining out of course, that would still be a devastating launch failure. But in that event, there's a little bit of an abort mode there with Cargo Dragon, just with no abort motors to actually separate it cleanly and completely like you need for when humans are on board. No offense to the Squidstronauts.
Yes. All right. So at 25 minutes and counting, so fueling operations are proceeding with the Falcon 9 right now. The next major event will become at the roughly the 21-minute mark when fueling on the RP-1 kerosene into stage 2 will be completed and closed out, and they will begin then purging the transporter erector with the big T-minus 20-minute vent to prepare it for the start of liquid oxygen loading into the second stage at T-minus 16 minutes. Both RP-1 and liquid oxygen right now still flowing into stage 1, so things still going good. And, you know, a lot of times, Thomas, I think we talk about the power of the rockets, but sometimes we forget to talk about the power that's in the payloads. There's some power going up to the International Space Station inside a Dragon this time, isn't there?
Quite literally, absolutely. So for the first time in a while, we don't get this too often because the space station is more or less complete. But every once in a while, we think of things to add on or to upgrade. And today is one of those days. 2 new solar panels are in the trunk of Dragon, so unpressurized cargo. And they are the first 2 of 6 total solar panels that will get launched on 3 different Cargo Dragon missions to begin to increase the power capacity of the International Space Station, partly as a result of increasing number of humans on board, and thus not only more life support needs, but also more experiments that they can run because they have the crew capacity too, so they need more electricity to also support those experiments. But also just the older solar panels are starting to degrade a little bit, and to make up for some of that lost power, they're going to add some more solar panels. They'll actually kind of overlap the current solar panels a little bit, so it's not kind of a one-to-one addition when you're adding these, but it will overall improve the power output of the solar arrays and give the station much more science capabilities.
That is excellent. Yes. So yeah, a lot of good stuff going up on going up today. And you know, it's interesting because, like you said, this is sort of interesting, right? Because like the station was deemed complete a while ago, but we've kept, or at least the U.S. side, but we've kept adding things to it, and now Axiom's going to be adding modules. So it's kind of like the second construction phase of the ISS is kicking into gear, both on the U.S. and the Russian segments of the station this year, which is really cool to see.
And a quick note here on that end, because when I was looking at some of the other recent additions, since STS-134, the final actual assembly flight to the International Space Station and the shuttle program, all of the other additions, most of which have been fairly small, have been in the trunk of Dragon capsules. There have been 5 additions, all of which have occurred on a Falcon 9 launch with a Cargo Dragon on board, and that will continue with these solar panels. So SpaceX actually playing a pretty strong role in all of the latest additions to the International Space Station.
Yes, indeed. All right. And again, clocks are still ticking down toward a liftoff 22 minutes from now at 13:29 Eastern or 17:29 UTC this afternoon from Launch Complex 39A at the Kennedy Space Center. This is the 22nd cargo resupply mission for SpaceX up to the International Space Station. And as a quick overview, it is bringing a total of 7,337, or sorry, a total of 3,328 kilograms of cargo up to the International Space Station. Crew supplies, science investigations, spacewalking equipment, various hardware and computer resources, as well as those 2 unpressurized ISS rollout solar arrays. A liftoff today would result in a docking on Saturday just before 5 a.m. Eastern Time, 9 a.m. UTC, and if we should have to delay until tomorrow, docking would coincidentally be the same time on Saturday. So things continuing to tick off here. And it's worth noting, Thomas, right? Like, because we talk a lot about the science experiments and everything too, but the cargo is interesting as well. And if I've done my math correctly, there's actually something from every single international partner on this flight. There are some CubeSats that will be going out the JAXA Kibo module later on this year from the space station. Canada has some science experiments. There's an ESA French experiment on board. NASA has stuff on board, and there's even a new CRS unit for helping the Progress's dock to the Russian side that's going up on Dragon. So a real international effort on this particular cargo mission today.
On the topic of CubeSats, I'd be mistaken if I didn't give a very brief shout out to my peers over at the other Embry-Riddle campus. To those at the Prescott campus, Godspeed to EagleSat 2, which is one of the CubeSats on board Falcon 9 today. And also, since I'm already talking, and I'll get fired if I don't mention it, the T-minus 20-minute event right on schedule from the transporter erector next to Falcon 9, a good sign that the fueling procedure is continuing nominally and everything is on track for an on-time liftoff.
Yes. And so I love these questions whenever animals go up into space. I love these questions. So Musical Wolves is asking, are the squids the first aquatic life to go into space? I don't believe they are, but we will have to check with you. I don't believe they are the first aquatic life.
Yeah, like off the top of my head, I can't think of another one, but we've been sending little tiny organisms up for so long, I would highly doubt that they're the first, but I can't think of one off the top of my head, so technically I don't know. Someone should check that.
Yeah, we'll definitely look for that. And then another question here from Nikolai, who is asking, how are the squids kept inside Dragon? Which is a great question. So they have their own little purpose-built aquarium that they go up in, and they're kept nice and safe in their own little environment on the ride up, just like mice are kept nice and safe. Spiders, bees, all the things that we have sent into space are kept nice and safe in their habitats for liftoff and for return if they come back. So yes.
Before the next question, I do want to make a brief segue into something else that's vaguely aquatically related. I don't know, I was trying to make a segue. But there is another piece of the flight profile today that's actually a little bit interesting, and I want to bring Julia into this. So, of course, there are no fairings on this flight because it's a Dragon capsule, so we're only looking at stage 1 recovery today. But that's happening a little bit differently this mission than some of the previous missions we've seen. Isn't that right, Julia?
That is correct. So today we are looking at, of course, I Still Love You, waiting only 303 kilometers downrange. So if you imagine the Georgia-Florida border and you just shoot east a little bit, that is where the landing platform, of course, I Still Love You, is waiting. And that requires a partial boost back burn. And we don't normally see them this close when we're talking about Starlink or other recovery missions. So we should see them come back in about a day and a half, maybe within 2 days. We're going to see this booster come back to Port Canaveral.
Yeah, that'll give a very interesting profile where we have a boost back burn, but not a return to launch site landing. It'll only come down, slow down a little bit so it lands closer to shore, like Julia said, to improve the turnaround time. And it also mitigates the fuel on board that first stage because you want a specific landing weight when you come down towards that drone ship. But that's something really interesting, and that was different from the previous CRS mission 21, which basically followed a ballistic trajectory, landed about twice as far downrange as this one will. And that's just a matter of the exact trajectory and orbital initial orbit that they're targeting today, and the mass that's on board. All of those factors can give you a couple different trajectory options, and today they've been able to make that partial boost back burn to make their recovery jobs a little bit easier.
So, Thomas, about that. So, it is because of the upgraded capabilities of Cargo Dragon that we don't see return to launch site missions as much anymore. Is that correct?
Yeah, so the Cargo Dragon spacecraft is a little bit heavier than its predecessor, or I should rephrase that. The Cargo Dragon 2 spacecraft is a little heavier than the Cargo Dragon 1 spacecraft, which of course means it can carry more things, it can carry more supplies and scientific experiments, but it also means Falcon 9 needs to work just a little bit harder to get into orbit, and thus those return to launch site landings that were fairly common around here with all of the CRS missions are becoming much more rare. They can only really happen for other low Earth orbit missions with relatively light payloads. So yeah, that's something that's kind of gone away here, but NASA and SpaceX happy to take advantage of Dragon's new abilities to launch more and more payloads to the station.
Indeed, and just crossing the 16-minute mark now, so liquid oxygen loading has begun into stage 2 at this time, and lots of questions that we've got here. Some people very interested about the physics of swimming in microgravity, and a lot of people too are noting that fish did go up during the Apollo era. So the squids are not the first aquatic life forms to go up. But yeah, a lot of people wondering about how the physics are different, and they would be, right? The physics of swimming would be different in a little bit different in microgravity, right? Water is a good microgravity simulator to some degree, but you're still under the force of gravity, right, on Earth. So it would be different. Now, this isn't really what this particular experiment is looking at. For exactly how they swim underwater, but yes, I mean those are like sort of neat little supplemental things you can get out of experiments sometimes. This particular experiment with the squids is actually looking at the relationship between probiotics and good microbes in the body and how they can help maintain health during long duration spaceflight. So we're actually using squids as a human analog in this case. And there's also a human version of the same experiment happening as well. On board this mission as well. So kind of a cool crossover between squid and human in that regard. Yeah, and here's another good one relating to the vehicle. This comes from Ezra. I feel like the trunk goes kind of unnoticed. Could you take a moment to explain a little bit about what it does and the cargo that it can carry, and has it ever been used before?
Yeah, absolutely. So the trunk has been around since the very beginning of the Dragon program, all the way back to Dragon 1. Looked a little bit different in the past. The version 1 of Dragon had deployable solar panels that were covered during launch, and then they ejected the covers once they reached orbit. On the version 2 spacecraft, the panels are put directly onto the trunk. There's no deployment mechanism, and there's no expendable covers. So it's a little bit more of a simpler mechanism. But basically, other than that, it's also got some radiators on the side. But other than that, on the inside, it's kind of just a hollow tube that you can stick stuff in. And they use it to put unpressurized cargo. So cargo that's not going inside the cabin of the space station, but things that will get mounted to the outside, experiments, things like solar arrays or new modules such as the Bigelow Expandable Activity Module that they launched a while ago. So those kind of things are what they put in trunk. Not all Dragon missions have stuff in the trunk. Sometimes there's simply not cargo needed that's unpressurized. On crew missions, the trunk does have an extra purpose. The 4 fins that are on the trunk actually provide air. On cargo.
Oh, there we go.
Yeah, I think I got a phone call that interrupted my transmission there.
Okay, yes, you went silent there.
Yeah, but just pointing out on the crew version, those fins on the trunk are very important for an in-flight abort scenario. On the cargo version, you'll notice there are still 2 of the fins, but not all 4. Of course, you don't need the in-flight abort scenario, so you don't need the aerodynamic stability, but 2 of the fins also have solar panels on them, and they still need that electricity production from the trunk. And so they keep 2 of the fins just so they can keep those solar panels for the cargo missions. But so yeah, the trunk is very important as far as power generation, thermal management with the radiators, and then of course unpressurized cargo, which more often than not is used on all of these CRS missions.
And it is the component of the Dragon that is not reused between flights. It is left in space. Yeah, it's heavy, right? So it's actually more efficient to ditch the trunk and then do the deorbit burn. And then the trunk comes down in about a year to a year and a half ish. Yeah,
which is unfortunate, because you want to mitigate space debris as much as you can, but those trunks do stay up for a fair bit. Again, they're in low orbits and they do decay relatively quickly compared to some other things. It'd be preferred if they could deorbit that. Obviously, there's not a whole lot of hardware to be reused there, but as far as mitigating space debris, there's a little bit of something to watch there. But overall, it's not a huge issue.
Yeah, indeed. And some other things too, our community telling us, Philip Whitehouse, one of our writers, telling us too that there are 2 British experiments on board today. Worm Stronauts and a LEO space debris mini satellite are also on board from the United Kingdom. So some UK experiments are on board as well. And here's a question we've now gotten a couple of times, both Keith and Dougal with $7 Canadian. And I'm going to specifically mention the Canadian because how's Canadarm doing is basically the question we're getting. Is it required for dockings today? What about that debris strike? So yeah, the question here from Dougal and the concern from Keith is regarding a piece of debris that hit Canadarm2, the station's robotic arm, or the main robotic arm on the station, I should say. The Canadarm is fine. It's fully operational. It was a very lucky hit in a good location that didn't take it offline. But even more so for today, Canadarm2 is not required for the actual docking of CRS-22 to the International Space Station. So unlike the previous Dragon version 1 capsules for CRS-1 through 20, which had to be grabbed by Canadarm3 and then berthed to the station, these cargo Dragons dock just like the crew missions. So Canadarm2 is not needed for that. It is, however, needed to reach into Dragon's trunk and take out the solar arrays. So Canadarm2 will be needed during CRS-22, but thankfully the debris hit is not an issue for its operations. And here's another good quick question here as we hit the 10-minute mark. Can the cargo Dragons launch from Slick 40? Or 41. Well, they cannot launch from 41 because that is the Atlas V launch pad. And they are not compatible with the Atlas V vehicle, so they could not go from 41. But they are capable of going from 40. Now, no cargo missions are currently planned from 40 because they really want to make use of the crew access arm for cargo late load, and using that side hatch is a lot easier to do when the vehicle is vertical at the pad and you can just swing the access arm over. So while there are no cargo Dragon launches set from 40, they can use 40 if they needed to for them.
And on that topic, really quick, I should mention that I'm actually looking at 2 Falcon 9s right now. I'll keep the camera on the one that's launching today, but way early this morning, a headless Falcon 9, if you will, no payload on board yet, but a Falcon 9 with its second stage is vertical over at Pad 40 right now, preparing for the Sirius XM-8 mission launching Saturday night, technically very early Sunday morning, but effectively Saturday night here in Florida. And that static fire did appear to be normal this morning, and so they should be on track to roll that rocket back, attach the Sirius XM satellite, and roll it back out for launch this weekend. So a busy week on the Space Coast right now, as there are 2 Falcon 9s in their respective launch campaigns.
Indeed, because that mission's coming up quick. There's little rest for SpaceX these days. A good question here. Are there any differences between the docking maneuvers with a crew versus a cargo Dragon? The technical answer to your question is no. There's no difference between how the cargo variant or the crew variant perform the docking maneuver. It's the same automated system that guides both in. However, the change does come in to which docking port they're going to. So this one in particular is docking to International Docking Adapter 3, which is located on the space-facing side of the US Harmony module. It's the same one, same docking port if you remember CRS-21 from December. It's the same one that went to. And when you dock like that onto what's known as the radial vector, meaning you're aiming your spacecraft down at Earth and you're kind of having to fight the velocity of the space station as well to maintain proper alignment to get to, it's not as efficient to dock on the radial velocity vector as it is the velocity vector, which is where the crew Dragons normally dock to, right? Where they just come up right to the front of the space station and connect, because that's just easier to do. But we like to leave the crew vehicles there. We like the ease of the crew vehicles docking there in a way, but also the cargo Dragons have to dock usually to to that IDA-3, that radial port, because that's the only port that the station's arm can reach inside the trunk to grab things out of. So that's why we see them go there. So no difference in how the capsules do it. If the crew capsules, and actually when the crew capsules dock on the radial velocity vector to IDA-3, they go through the same procedure. So it's just the docking port that ends up mattering, and station orientation. Here's one from Moldy Space Industries, $5. And Thomas, I think you can guess what it begins with.
Thomas Fan Club, how's it going?
Yes,
Moldy
it does.
Space?
Moldy Space Industries saying hashtag Thomas Fan Club, and also Happy Pride from our from our fake space program to your real reporting team. Yes, indeed. Thank you very much, Moldy Space Industries, and yes, Happy Pride, indeed. Here's a good question from Wesley. When the trunk does re-enter, do they guide it with its fins, or does it just burn up?
No, it just fins. Oh my god, I just combined those words weirdly. It just burns up, kind of uncontrolled. In fact, those fins are not actuated. They don't pivot or anything for aerodynamic control. They're passive fins that just in an abort scenario passively allow the Dragon spacecraft to be aerodynamically stable on the way up during an abort. But on reentry, the trunk is completely uncontrolled. It naturally decays and burns up completely on reentry.
Gotcha. And I see 5.5 minutes ahead of liftoff. I've got one more question for you, Thomas, before we start handing off our pre-launch checks to you. And then I have a port question for Julia as well. But for Thomas, is this the same Dragon that flew the CRS-21 mission in December?
A very good question. No, it is not. This is, again, a very rare circumstance where all of the hardware on Falcon 9 and Dragon today are brand new. Brand new booster, brand new second stage as always, brand new trunk as always, and a brand new Dragon capsule. This is the second Cargo Dragon version 2 spacecraft, and after this mission and its successful recovery, we'll expect this one to fly again. But the capsule that flew CRS-21 is currently being prepared for its next mission. I believe it is slated for CRS-23, so they'll have two spacecraft that can kind of alternate and handle the CRS missions. There is also a third Cargo Dragon under construction, so SpaceX will be planning to operate a fleet of 3 for the near term, but this particular one is making its first flight.
There you go. And 4.5 minutes to go until liftoff, Thomas. I'm going to let you do your camera pre-checks and everything. But Julia, really quickly before we get to the liftoff here, Joe is asking, any news about a shortfall of gravitas?
Well, we know it exists now. Isn't that exciting?
It is.
It has
it
been
is. We know
spotted
it
in
exists.
Louisiana,
Yes.
and it's coming to centers on board.
Oh,
Brent,
Julia. Yeah. Sorry, Julia. You went completely robotic there. Unfortunately, I'll come back to that question once this booster is safely on its drone ship. How about that? Since we're getting toward launch there, but yeah, it looks like we had a hiccup with comms there, and Julia with the field with the signal connectivity. But here we are, 3.5 minutes away from liftoff now of the Falcon 9 rocket with Cargo Dragon on the CRS-22 mission up to the International Space Station. At this time, you can see the cradle arms opening there, and we are about to watch the transporter erector retract to its pre-pullback position here, and then it will do a throwback maneuver right at T0 to really get out of the way of the vehicle, and you can see it moving there ever so slightly to 88.5 degrees. One of the final visual elements that tells us that we are getting very close to a flight here today. Right now, propellant closeout operations are in work, and fueling of the Falcon 9's first and second stages are wrapping up just 2.5 minutes prior to liftoff now. Thomas, how's it looking there on the ground?
Right now, it is looking like a beautiful day to go to space, and as the countdown proceeds, I think we're all on track. No technical items to worry about. Weather looks great. Hopefully we'll get Falcon 9 fighting through some clouds and breaking through the sky although on the way to orbit. Should be a fantastic day for a launch, so let's hope it goes. 2 minutes to go.
Indeed. Alrighty there. So just about 2 minutes to go now until the liftoff of that Falcon 9 rocket from 39A at the Kennedy Space Center. All's looking good. We're going to momentarily stop taking questions here and focus on the liftoff. You can see the water tower is overflowing there just to the left of the tower. That's how they know it's full. No fancy sensors, just fill it until it overflows. All of that water will be dumped into the launch pad around the Falcon 9, both prior to and during engine ignition and liftoff to help with sound suppression and acoustic control on the vehicle. But with about a minute and a half left, let's go ahead and listen into the sounds of Falcon 9 and wait for that liftoff. And Thomas, per our agreement, I'll go ahead and cover the liftoff statement for you. Crossing that 1 minute mark now prior to flight. Falcon 9 is in startup and Dragon is in countdown, standing by for the final go. And there we go. And there we go. The final go for launch has been given. So we are 32 seconds away and counting from the liftoff of Falcon 9 and Dragon from Florida. A new Dragon and a new Falcon 9 about to take to the skies. All right. And here we go, under 10 seconds to go now until liftoff. We have Merlin engine ignition and liftoff of the Falcon 9 rocket with over 3,000 kilograms of supplies and squid and tardigrade crew members for the space station.
That roll from Falcon 9.
There we go. A good, successful liftoff out of 39A. The vehicle rolling onto the proper course. Thomas had a great track there until lost it in the clouds there. Oh, look at that. Another cloud deck it's going through. So cool. Alrighty, so far so good for Falcon 9. Over a minute now into the flight. You can hear all the sounds as Falcon 9 really beat the weather to get out of Florida today. Picture perfect on-time liftoff here. And you can hear preparations are now underway for the ignition of that upper stage Merlin engine, the vacuum optimized one, now in chill down, getting cryogenically ready for its ignition here. About 30 seconds remaining in first stage flight now before we should have stage shutdown and separation. As a reminder, after the first stage shuts down, it will do a small boost back burn. It will not be enough to bring it all the way back to Florida and the launch site, but it will be enough to aim it for basically a few hundred kilometers off the Florida-Georgia border for its landing, about 300 kilometers northeast of here, all continuing to go well per the callouts. Let's watch stage separation now. And main engine cutoff confirmed. There. Look at that beautiful view. Alrighty, and there goes the Merlin engine igniting, and the booster doing its boost back burn, heading for the drone ship. Of course, I still love you. Located off the Florida-Georgia border, you could actually see that first stage booster starting its boost back burn there before they cut to the other. Camera here on the second stage. So now you get telemetry for both. On the left-hand side is your stage 1 telemetry, and on the right is stage 2, continuing to take Dragon onward into orbit. Thomas, are you back on comms with us? How was that from your view in the field?
You know, we've mentioned this a couple times. If you come down here for a launch and it just so happens to have a cloud deck, you might get a little extra sound, and boy, was that true today. What a gorgeous liftoff. I think I kept it through the clouds best I could there. I know we've got other camera views too, but it was a gorgeous launch in and out of clouds, and just sound was amazing. It was a great launch.
That's absolutely incredible. The sound is actually reaching me in Daytona right now. So I'm starting to hear the rumble and feel the ground shake up here north of the Space Center. Julia, did you have any luck from over in Orlando by any chance?
Oh, no luck there. No.
Okay, I feel bad for someone in our chat the other day who said they were going to be at Disney World today and really hoping to be able to see it from there. So,
You know,
Yeah.
I can look west really briefly and see exactly why Julia didn't see anything. There's just about no blue sky that direction. So I know, Julia, you'll catch the next one.
I'll get the
Yeah.
next one.
All right, but so far so good. The callouts indicating a nominal performance 4.5 minutes into the flight. The first stage is at 153 kilometers in altitude, about 10,000 kilometers per second now, and the first stage has already reached apogee and is on its way back down. Speed about 3,100 kilometers an hour and increasing right now as that altitude drops. So stage 1 on its way to the drone ship, stage 2 continuing on its way into orbit.
Stage 1, of course, at this point has finished that partial boost back burn, so it is on the trajectory that will take it down on top of the drone ship. There is a re-entry burn coming up next to help protect it against the heating and aerodynamic forces of re-entry, and that'll be prior to its, of course, its landing burn, while the stage 2 continues to take Dragon all the way to orbit.
Yes, indeed. And of course, it's landing on, of course, I Still Love You, one of 2 drone ships. And once it gets to the drone ship, we will have a question about the new drone ship that shall be joining the fleet here momentarily. But standing by now for the ignition of the 3 Merlin engines on the first stage for that entry burn to help slow the booster down. That should begin momentarily here. And there you go, those good ignition on the 3 Merlins on the base of the booster there. Watch that speed drop rapidly. This is so cool. This is where they basically use the fire of the engines to create a heat shield in front of the vehicle while slowing it down at the same time. And you can see that burn complete there, Thomas and Julia. So next up is the landing burn, which will occur a fairly good chunk of time before the stage reaches orbit with Dragon. So here's hoping the video feed holds out and we can just see the drone ship appear beneath the booster. Those are always the coolest shots.
Absolutely. And they're a little closer to the shore, so they might be a little bit easier to maintain that communications link. We'll see.
Mm-hmm. And of course, I'm sure the NASA and the Inspiration 4 crew watching this landing, this booster's next mission is slated to be the Inspiration 4 launch, and the mission after that, the Crew 3 launch for NASA and ESA. So here we go.
Look at that layer. That was incredible.
That was incredible. Look at that. Oh my gosh. Thomas, Julia, that's worth watching on the big screen when you guys get home.
All right, got that.
That
You
looks
got
beautiful.
All right, here comes the landing burn, and the landing burn has started. There's the drone ship underneath the vehicle. Let's watch. can see those grid fins turning to keep it on course.
Wow. What a
Legs
view.
deployed. What a view. And there you have it, my friends. B-1067 has successfully landed on Of Course I Still Love You for recovery and reuse on Inspiration 4 and Crew 3 and many, many others. Hopefully the start of a good career for the booster. I think we can not fault it for landing slightly off center line there. A massive feat to hit the drone ship that far downrange, like for a rocket. That's incredible.
And of course, it's the first mission. So the booster, was trying this for the first time. It's got one landing under its belt. It knows what to do next time. It'll nail it next time.
There you go. There you go.
Yeah.
And on that mark, we are approaching stage engine cutoff for the second stage. And then, Julie, I know we have a question for you about the drone ship, but very close to orbit insertion here for Falcon 9. And there is Seco at 8 minutes 48 seconds into the flight. Falcon 9 and Dragon are in orbit. It's about a 3-minute coast now until Dragon spacecraft separation, but we do have confirmation of nominal orbit insertion, so that is fantastic. So Dragon in orbit. We'll wait a few more minutes now until spacecraft separation. So Julia, let's go back to this question we had right before liftoff. So we just saw the first stage land on Of Course I Still Love You, one of 2 drone ships here on the East Coast, but there's a new one coming. What do we know about a shortfall of gravitas?
So what we know is it is real. That's a start, because for a while we didn't know where it was. We just knew it was under construction. So it is in Louisiana, and they have begun getting it fitted for use most likely on the East Coast. The thruster pods have begun to be installed. Some of the containers have gone on the bow. Now, the question is, we have not spotted the wings yet. So are the wings being built in Louisiana and installed, or will they be built here and then installed upon arrival at Port Canaveral?
That's interesting.
Yeah.
Go ahead. What's the expectation? Yeah, sorry.
Well, the expectation is that a shortfall of gravitas will join the East Coast fleet, and then perhaps, Of Course I Still Love You, will be going over to the West Coast to rejoin the fleet over there as they begin their launch cadence. And the question with the with the licenses that have been issued from the FAA is, how soon can all of this happen? Because it appears they could launch from Vandenberg as early as July. Will a drone ship be there for recovery, though? Luckily, those licenses are good for a good, I believe, 6 months. So.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
I don't think we're going to make July, just because to keep the cadence up on the East Coast, one of these drone ships is going to have the wings taken off, which will give this this team on the East Coast some experience taking them off, which means perhaps ASOG could have theirs installed here in Port Canaveral as well, but that's still really up in the air.
Yeah. Gotcha. So really, we know where it is, we know it exists. It's just a matter of which port is it going to be based at, and where does it get the final things that it needs to be able to accommodate the Falcon 9, the extension to its the deck, basically, those wings you were talking about.
Right.
Yeah.
Because no matter what, whichever one's going to go west is going to have wings taken off. So
right.
You could argue that ASOG will go west and have wings installed there. We're just going to have to wait and see when they go in the Gulf, which direction they go.
There we go. And right on cue, here comes spacecraft separation in just a couple of seconds. You can see the 2 roll-up solar arrays, and there is separation of Dragon. You can see the 2 IROSAs from Boeing, the roll-up solar arrays, or roll-out solar arrays for the International Space Station tucked safely in the trunk, and the little grabber unit that the Canada arm will reach in and grab the solar arrays out of the trunk. And absolutely gorgeous view as Dragon departs the top of the Falcon 9 on its way to the International Space Station with a successful launch and orbit insertion. Docking is currently planned for approximately 5 a.m. on 5 a.m. on Saturday, June 5th. That is 5 a.m. Eastern Time or 9 a.m. UTC. And NASA's coverage of that is set to begin at 90 minutes prior to the anticipated docking. So what an incredibly gorgeous launch. Thomas, what's the feeling down there at the Space Center? I know it's always good when there it is. That's the point. That's the shot we were waiting for. Das's favorite
Absolutely.
launch day shot.
Absolutely. Falcon be gone. There is no rocket on that pad anymore, which means we can put another one there and launch again before too long. Also, right on cue, I did just hear a crack of thunder, which I think is our cue to just about start packing it up here. Of course, on this mission, unlike some of the Starlinks we've been dealing with recently, the launch is completely over. Dragon is on its trajectory to the station, and we'll check back in with it when it's starting to approach station on Saturday. But Falcon 9 has done its job, and perfectly successful launch for the CRS-22 mission.
Indeed. And Julia, how are things out there? Thank you so much for joining us on comms today. I hope you're staying dry over there in Orlando.
So far staying dry. We had a few showers, but just a lot of clouds.
That is good to hear. All right, so with that, 14 minutes after a successful liftoff and with Dragon wonderfully floating away in power positive mode from the top of Falcon 9, that is going to do it for our launch broadcast here today. Thank you so much for everyone who participated and joined in. Thank you to all of our channel members, everyone who has subscribed and hit notifications, to everyone who's also watched those ads or sent a super chat. Thank you so much. All of that participation really does help us bring all of these cool events, not just launches from Florida, but from a lot of different cool space locations around the world. So thank you everyone truly for your support. It means the world to us. We literally couldn't be doing this without you. So thank you so much. And here's to our fearless squidstronauts and tardigrade nauts that are in orbit and on their way to the International Space Station. I'm Chris Gebhardt with NASA Spaceflight. I was joined by my colleague Thomas Berghardt out in the field, who was manning the camera. And Thomas, I just have to say, epic tracking shot of the Falcon 9 even through the clouds. You did awesome today.
Thank you. I do my best, and thanks everyone for watching, and we'll be back here again on Saturday night for another Falcon 9 launch, so I hope you'll come back for that. And also, for those of you who are fans of our NSF live show every Saturday, we have a pretty special one planned for Saturday. Stay tuned for a very cool episode coming up this weekend.
Yes, indeed we do. Indeed. Hopefully we'll be able to talk about that a little bit more here coming up. But Julia, thank you also for joining us out in the field and answering questions for everyone. Always a pleasure to have you on with us.
Well, thank you for having me. I had a great time.
Excellent. And in the background, and I think you heard him at least once on stream, was Michael Baylor, our producer, reporter, developer, man extraordinaire here, pulling all the levers and the strings behind the scenes, making it all work for us today. Thank you so much, Michael, for all of your help as well.
No problem.
And I'm Chris Gebhardt, so thank you all for joining us. That's going to wrap up our coverage of the CRS-22 launch. We will see you all Saturday for NSF Live. Peace out, nerds.
Pressure looks good. Following up. Roger, roll, Atlantic. Water tower, fly! Flight outside of feed off. Yikes. You bet. Concur. We don't need any more of these.